We're checking in with where Hockey Town sits today emotionally. This idea of they're going to make the playoffs. Well, they're not in the playoffs this morning. They've lost 3 in a row, and John has detailed a brutal schedule to the point where he has shifted from, slightly believing they're going to get into the other side of the aisle. Now you don't think this team's going to make the playoffs.
No, and some of it is clear PTSD from what happened last year. The start of March is starting exactly the same as it did last year. The only difference is there's some difference in the roster, but Dylan Larkin is healthy now. He wasn't last year, and that's when they started their skid.
He's got to play better. Ticket Texter points out our captain is scuffling. Last 3 games, 0 points, 0 points, 0 points. A -3. Sick of having a bunch of good players. We need a real star that we can lean on. Nate at work. Look, he's going to take the brunt of this because he's on that first line, and this first line hasn't delivered.
Yeah.
And listen, you put the C on your sweater, you're the leader of this team. You cannot go under again. This team can't collapse again under your watch. Ticket Texter says, no offense, but talk show GMs drive me nuts. Every deadline for every team, you guys have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Trade for the sake of trade. Guys, stay in your lane.
You're right. We're not the general manager, and we're not in those meetings. But I think it's safe to say that they could be better, and there are ways to make them better. That's what we're trying to figure out. How could they be better?
Steve Eiserman, please, please, please get a defenseman, get Hull out of the lineup. He's the worst D-man in the league. Literally, him and Gustafsson are metrically the worst pair in hockey, and yet they're out on the ice, sometimes even for the penalty kill. No reason. And no wonder it's one of the worst in hockey. Wings peaked early. They look done. I hope I'm wrong. It's a strange hockey team. Real question, I'm not a huge hockey follower. Will the Wings win a cup adding 1 to 2 players? If not, why not sell? It says, why sell out for a playoff appearance?
Well, the value of getting to the playoffs is you have so many guys on your team, and this is why you have some hope for the future. It does nothing for you right now, but you do have some hope for the future that Marco Kasper, Lucas Raymond, Edvinson, Sider, and anybody else that will be on the roster next year, some good young players. The ones that are on the roster right now need playoff experience. They need to know what it's like to close a deal, seal a deal, finish it out. They weren't able to do it last year. How do they get over that hump this year to get into the playoffs? What do the playoffs feel like? How do you prepare for the playoffs? How do you play in the playoffs? All of those things are lessons to be learned. Playoff experience is a real thing.
Think of this as prerequisite courses.
Yeah.
You want to pass Calc 4? Got to take Calc 3. Want to pass Calc 3? Got to take Calc 2. You got to work your way up from geometry, algebra, algebra 2, pre-calc, all this way up to your master's level courses.
Yeah, so we get texts like this one. Do we think that Alec Martinez, a name you threw out, John, do we think that's going to make them compete for a cup? ? No one's saying that. It's just an example of a rental player who could help them on defense, who has some cup experience, who could nudge them. You're not giving up a first for Alec Martinez.
No, third would be the highest you would give up.
And they got an extra third. I mean, I don't feel like we've laid down this gauntlet where if Eiserman doesn't mortgage the future to win right now, he's a boob. Nobody's saying that. But people get very defensive of Eiserman. They are in the longest drought in franchise history. I'll say that again. They had a stretch in the 70s where they were called the dead things. This is a longer playoff drought. And the majority of it has happened under Eiserman. Holland dealt him a lousy hand. We got to stop making those excuses 6 years in. If the team isn't good enough to add, let's say that these people who are making excuses and say you can't add, they're not good enough, then I need you to redirect they're not good enough to 19. You know, it's funny how that connection isn't made by those fans when they go, you guys need to stop talking about them adding, they're just not good enough, they're not ready. Then that needs to be pushed to Eiserman's doorstep. Why not?
Well, and if they are good enough to make the playoffs, if they're playing good enough to make the playoffs right now, did they just simply dig themselves too big of a hole to get out of, to recover from?
Yep.
And again, where does that point?
Texter says on the subject of PTSD, the saga's getting old. How many times we have to hear the excuses? Players got to play better. At least the Pistons play hard every single night. I do think there's something with that right now, where people are pointing out, hey, the Pistons have figured it out. At least they're doing it.
And we see the energy that they play with every single night. When was the last time you watched a Pistons game and you're like, you know what? Their head's just not in it. They're tired.
It's rare.
Yeah. I mean, you can't even pick it out.
No,
it's happened.
Yeah, they lose games, but it's not because
of a lack of energy or a lack of effort. And I'm not saying that last night was a lack of energy or effort.
No, it was actually a good exchange with Wojo and McClellan, because McClellan said we didn't have our legs. And Wojo said, well, is that like discouraging or disheartening that given the stakes, you don't have your legs? And he said, no, McClellan drew the distinction that want to and having your legs are two different things. And he says it's more frustrating because he feels like the fight and the want to was there, but they didn't have their legs under him last night.
Yeah.
But the fight's got to be there. I thought the fight was there in the first period, but then you give up cheapy, then you screw up and you're down 2-0, and then Carolina leans on you, man. That they play a brand of hockey that is unforgiving. Even when the Wings had a power play, they're smothering the point. Like, they're aggressive. They take the puck. They possess the puck. Wings are losing face-offs, and they're playing catch-up the entire way. Now, McClellan in the third period, he throws Casper down in the center spot on the third line, bumps Soderblom up. Soderblom scores a goal. Hey, there's a little bit of juice. It's too little too late in the third period against a good hockey team. You're just not coming back down 2 goals against Carolina when you're just throwing your lines into a blender. They have a lot that they need to do to make the playoffs. Got to beat Utah.
Yes.
Got to give them some life at the deadline. Keep the train on the tracks. Like, I'm not going to panic unless they lose to Utah or Eiserman sits on his hands. Like, it's still right in front of them for this team to make the playoffs.